So in this video, I'm going to be reviewing the Silent Hill 2 remake. So first off, when we get into gameplay, I want to mention that I do like the control scheme of this game. Very rarely does it seem like you have to go into inventory screens. I feel like all three weapons you can get off firearms throughout the game are on the D-pad of the PlayStation 5, which is what I played on. The map is going up on the D-pad, so they're all on the D-pad, and then the melee weapon is just if you attack without aiming in, you don't use the weapon you're selected on, and I think that control scheme is very, very solid. It's not super advanced or anything, but it doesn't need to be for the type of game this is. I think it's very, very solid for the type of game it is, and is trying to be, well, and is they're trying to just have better gameplay than Silent Hill 2 original, which I think they succeeded in tremendously. The enemy combat in the game subsequently is also solid, far better than the original, but this game doesn't have to have amazing in-depth combat. It's not meant for that. I feel like the whole combat can just be described as dodge a few times, hit. Some enemies have got slightly different attacks and are tankier, but it all comes down to the same premise. Although some of the enemies are really, really cool in the fact that like you've got mannequin enemies that, well, be mannequins, they try to like hide in corners and stuff, stand still, and a lot of the times throughout the game I didn't notice them, and then they jump out at you when you get close, and I think that's really, really cool. But then to counteract that, they're a bit weaker, and then you've got the nurses who are a bit tankier and they attack more, but they're kind of out in the open, they don't hide from you. And I did like this enemy variety. There wasn't a huge variety in enemies, but I think there was enough for the game. Any fewer, and you'd be like, maybe a bit more, but any more, and you'd be like, well, maybe this is too much, right? So I feel like the enemy variety for the length of the game is absolutely fine. And the combat with them is fine, besides the bosses. The bosses in this game, besides one that I didn't mind visually, all the bosses, especially from a gameplay aspect, are poor in my opinion. I did not like them. It's nothing to do with their difficulty. I played on light difficulty and they were extremely easy. But even if you played on hard and they're extremely hard, which I don't know if they are or not, but even if they were harder, that's not the issue I have. The issue is just the way they interact with the world, visually as well, which I'll get into, I suppose, when I talk about visuals. But just the combat with them just doesn't feel satisfactory in my opinion. But besides for one visually, which I'll get into, I think all the bosses are rather lackluster personally. The puzzles are lackluster in some aspects and fine in others. There's some puzzles that I don't mind, I think are absolutely fine. Some that I, like I said, are lackluster. I've used that word 3 times now, I believe. But my favourite puzzle would probably be like a 6 out of 10. And my least favourite would be like a 4 out of 10. Like the puzzles, there's no abhorrent puzzles, but there's no great puzzles. The puzzles are fine, perfectly fine for this game. I don't think they need to be far better to make this game good, but it would have, helped, definitely. And I just don't feel like the puzzles they're nothing special, but they're definitely not abhorrent. They're average throughout this game. And a lot of the puzzles are just fetch questy type things, and I'm not even sure if I would really count them as puzzles, but the ones that you would straight up call puzzles, they're fine. Now there's a prison section within the game where you've got to switch on like lights, and the lights have a timer, and it's the only time in this game that it has this, like the only section in the entire game. And I think it was so pointless, it doesn't add anything in my opinion. I don't know why they do that. As far as I'm aware, it doesn't have a gameplay, or it doesn't do anything gameplay wise, unless it does it make enemies more aggressive or something? I don't think it does. I think it just makes them harder to see, right? So I suppose it'd be that, but it just seems really pointless. Like, why would you add that in? It doesn't seem like it added anything. And it also doesn't make any sense because it's in a prison and the parts that they're in. It just seems silly. I don't know. And last but not least, on a gameplay aspect, I didn't particularly like the exploration throughout the game. Now, if you're a really big Silent Hill 2 fan, whether it's the original or this game or both, or just Silent Hill as a series in general, then you might like the exploration because there's quite a bit of lore that you'll find just exploring. That's fair enough. But if you're going off the beaten track, which you can't do that often, but when you are like in the town, for example, you can go off the beaten track, or when you first meet a certain character, what you find, you'll just find some ammo, health, and then a note that has like lore on it, and that's it. There's not really any like visual lore really, besides like callbacks to Silent Hill 2, I suppose. But for someone like me who didn't particularly love the original and isn't a Silent Hill nut, I didn't really care for the exploration in this game. It didn't feel rewarding. If I ever was to replay the game, which I'm not sure if I will, I would just go straight for the story, because I just felt like exploring was a waste of time for me personally. Now, going on to visuals, this game looks great graphically, in terms of graphic fidelity, in terms of visually pleasing, in terms of the way the rooms look like they were once lived in. I think graphically this game looks very, very, very good. In any way you want to define graphics or visuals or whatever, I think this game succeeds in that part very well. In fact, I do think it is the best part of the entire game, bar none. You go into a room in like an apartment block and it looks like that room was actually lived in. They all look unique from one another. It's just, they've done a very, very good job with the graphics, the visuals of this game. I also didn't mind this cutscene, which shows how facial expressions can really tell a story, and unlike the original, they've now got the chance to do that, and I feel like it's very, very well done.
I'll find some way to... I'll come back, I promise.
That being said, one thing I did not like about the visuals in general was just that it was too dark. It's nothing to do with the fidelity of the graphics or how the world necessarily looks, really. I mean, I suppose it kind of is, but the game was just too dark a lot. But they could have easily fixed this. Instead of making the brightness of the game overall higher, they could have fixed this easily by just having like a lamp in a corner or something. Most of the time it was fine, I want to get that clear, especially when you're walking around Silent Hill with the fog, but it's still day. Like, that's absolutely perfectly fine. And in fact, I think it looks very, very good. But if you're walking in like a building that's dark with no lights on, it is... You cannot see sometimes, and well, that's an over-exaggeration. It wasn't that dark, and you do get a flashlight to try to compensate, but I do think at times it was a bit too dark. I tried turning up the gamma, but it just looked washed out, so criticism of the visuals, but overall I think the visuals are absolutely stunning, and I do think this game's strongest part is the visuals. Sound design in this game, unlike visuals, I didn't really notice anything particularly great about them. There were well, I lie there a little bit. There were a few moments where like I'd hear like I'd be near a door and I'd hear the wind blowing through the cracks in the door, and that was really, really solid. But then there'd be a jump scare like this. And it just seems to come out of nowhere, and it's like, and throughout the whole game, you get stuff where it's like you'll be walking through a tunnel and you'll hear like a whisper, and I think it's meant to be one of the characters in the game's whispering at you. I don't want to get into story spoilers, but I believe it has got lore implications, unless I'm just completely wrong there and it's random, but it just comes across as a bit silly and not, you know, I mean, it makes sense, I suppose, but just because something makes sense doesn't mean it's good. Some of the voice acting of certain characters, I mean of this character here.
Do I look like your girlfriend?
No, my... Wait, wife. I can't believe it. Your face, your voice, you could be...
My name is Maria. I don't look like a ghost, do I?
Sounds rather poor. She sounds like a female G-Man, if you know who G-Man is. But overall, and for most, if not all other characters, to be fair, I think she's the only one. The voice acting is fine, if not quite solid. And the sound design in general of the world is pretty good. You know, you'll hear, you know, you'll go under some traffic lights and you'll hear the wires, and you go up to a door and you hear the wind blowing through the door, like the cracks in the door. And I think overall the sound design is very solid. The only thing I really didn't like, and I think maybe they did this on purpose to make you be a bit more scared, I suppose, but the enemy sounds are awful in terms of you don't know where they are. Like you'll know they're to your left, but they could be really close or really far, and I feel like that maybe they've done that on purpose. Like you never know how close they are, but I don't particularly like that. I don't like that. But going into horror, and some of this will be sound, I suppose, but going into horror, the horror in this game, I do not think, I mean, I did play it on light, so I want to get that out of the way right now, but the horror in this game is not scary at all. I do not think this game is remotely scary, and I'm not just saying that as a hard man. I'm a big baby. I'm scared of my own shadow. But this game, well, that's an over-exaggeration, but this game is just not scary in my opinion. Now, I think maybe it's because it's third person. I think for me personally, I'm more scared. Like, for example, I'm scared to play, if anyone knows this game, I'm scared to play the game Zombie U. I want to play it, but I've seen gameplay of it and stuff, and I tried to play the first 30 minutes of it, and it scared me. But I think it's because it's in first person. I feel like if the game wasn't in first person, it'd be far less scary. In fact, I'm certain it would be. So maybe it's because it's not in third person. Like, I found Resident Evil 7 scarier than this game, but maybe it's because it was in first person. So I think maybe it's first person that makes me more scared, I don't know. But this game to me wasn't that scary at all. That being said, I know people have different fears, and overall as a horror game, I think the atmosphere, the horror atmosphere and stuff is fine. It's definitely not bad. I wouldn't say it's amazing by any stretch, but it's fine. There was a few scares, however, I did like. They weren't like scary, but I did like them. There was one where you go through a door and the stairs are gone, and it's kind of like, ooh, and I kind of liked that. And then I liked one where you were checking up on, you had to get a coin from a machine, and then you think you're safe because you're interacting with a key item, and then it turns out, oh no, an enemy, you can hear an enemy come in the door on your left. And it's not a strong enemy or anything, but it's just a cool little, like it makes you think that, oh, you're not safe even if you're in your inventory, or or inspecting an item kind of thing, which I think is cool. The horror is very hit and miss. I think overall it succeeds in the atmosphere, but in terms of actually being scary or fearful, all that sort of stuff, I think I wouldn't say it falls flat. It's definitely not horrific in this aspect, but it wasn't, to me personally, and obviously I'm the one reviewing it, that scary. But I think a lot of that was because it was in third person. Now, very briefly mentioning the story, very briefly, because I don't want to, one, spoil it, even though you've probably seen a lot of cutscenes that I've shown on screen, but two, I just feel like I don't understand the story perfectly, because I'm honestly, and this is going to be maybe the most controversial part of this review, I'm not interested, that's if anyone watches this review, but I'm not interested in the story at all, because I don't think it's that good. As a psychological horror, I don't think it delves that well into the psychological aspect of someone. I really don't personally. I think it's extremely overrated in this aspect, and that's just me. I won't dive deep into it. One, because I'm quite bored of the story. I don't want to. I find it quite boring. But two is if you want to experience it yourself. But the multiple endings you can get and all that sort of, like, I didn't find them, like, besides some of the acting from some of the characters, the actual psychological aspect, the big plot twist, which there is one, I just didn't find all that interesting. Like, the most interesting parts of the game were visually for me, or maybe even the sound, but not the story at all. I just thought the story, which is meant to be the biggest part of this game, I just thought was very lackluster. Well, not even lackluster, I just think it's quite bad. I'm not particularly fond of it. Well, bad's an over-exaggeration, right? But considering how highly people praise this game, for me, I don't think the story... I've played horror games just this year. I don't think this story in this game, this might be extremely controversial, the story in this game I don't think is that much better than the Silent Hill game that came out for free on PlayStation in January of this year, in January of 2024, which is it called The Short Message? I also want to quickly mention as well that I think the enemy designs in this game, I should have put this in visuals, but I just thought about it now. I don't think the enemy designs are that good. I think people over-exaggerate how good they are personally. I actually think, and the reason it made me think of this is because I actually think the enemy in The Short Message, the one enemy, looks far better design-wise than anything in this game. So I do think the enemy design in this game, it's not bad, but I think it is extremely overrated personally. And one more thing I want to quickly get into is I dislike how there's no unlockable outfits. There's 3 outfits you can get, well, like head pieces you can get, I suppose. One of them's for the deluxe edition and the other 2 are for pre-order in the game, which is just like, come on, right? It's not a big deal at all, but it's like, it'd be nice. The only thing you get for beating the game, I think, is like different filters, like a VHS filter for, you know, and etc, black and white filter. But yeah, overall, Silent Hill 2 is a solid game. It's not a bad game by any stretch of the imagination, but I personally, and I want people to be civil about this because it's just an opinion, think it's very, very overrated. I think I'd give it about a 6 out of 10. I actually gave the original a 6 out of 10 as well.